Hello, thanks for joining me today. So today, finally going to be rebuilding all the brake parts and installing them on the bike. So I went with the same red powder coat that I got on the levers and triple trees and master cylinders a while back. The rear master cylinder, I just rattle canned it, and I'm really glad I didn't use that same paint on the calipers because it would not match what's already on the bike at all. Fortunately, this part's very well hidden, but they all look fantastic, and I'm excited to get started here. So everything's nice and clean. I took some rubbing alcohol to the inside last night, so I'm going to start with the calipers. It's going to be the easier part. Inside the rebuild kits that I got from Brake Crafters, it's the new friction seal in step 1. So they include some of this rubber grease, and they advise just a very light coating. No globs or anything like that, because this stuff, if it globs up inside your brake system, can clog tiny passageways. It's much thicker than brake fluid is. So just a quick smear of that. All the way around. Fit that into its groove. And that protrudes just above the surface a little bit, which is what you want. And I bought the kit with new pistons because mine were pretty corroded, and these are stainless, so it was worth the extra change in my book. These are going to get a nice light smear of fresh .4 brake fluid. I'm doing this down here in the office instead of the garage because it just seemed like a much cleaner environment right now. Let's see how this goes. That felt very nice. Once I got it going straight. Yeah. Moves freely now. Not too freely, naturally. But not bound up in there. Perfect. I think that pad spring goes in easier before you put the rubber boot on. And it just rests in there, like so. Maybe it's the other way around. Here's we'll find out. We have 2 more to do. So I got some time for trial and error here. That's in place now. Having the piston farther up definitely helped. So I think on the next one, I'll put it into about there, then put the boot on, followed by the clip, and then compress it down to get the pad spring. That's where that sits. Kit also comes with new bleeders, new little rubber caps, and seals for the banjo bolt as well. Save those for later. You can grab a wrench. go. One rebuilt caliper. Looks nice. I've already done the caliper brackets. Was just greasing up those pins, cleaning everything out, and putting the new boots on. And these came out really nice. Alright, let's do another caliper. This one just so happens to be the rear caliper that gave me so much fight getting the piston out. So we'll have to see how this goes. That looks beautiful. Alright, there we have it. All three calipers rebuilt. And so far without damaging the powder coat. Alright, here are the contents of the Brake Crafters Frontmaster rebuild kit. Boot, snap ring, washer, primary and secondary cups. So first, this cup needs attached or installed on the piston, and that orientation is important with the flared end facing into your bore. This is the far side that contacts the primary cup. So give this a little bit of this rubber grease. I'll fit that on there. I'm thinking it might be better to try going on this direction. Yeah, that was the way to go. Just be careful going over this little piece of spring steel on the end. I feel like that could pretty easily cut one of these secondary cups. So now that that's done, just need to line everything up, give it a little rubbing of brake fluid and put it in there. So that's how this gets stacked in. Fat side of the spring at the bottom of the bore, then your primary cup with the flare facing the spring, and then your piston with the secondary cup also flare downwards, downstream if you will. I've just got a cap full of fresh, clean brake fluid that I'm dipping my pinky in, so I can give these parts a nice light coating of brake fluid. The fun part's going to be compressing that while installing the circlip lock ring, whatever you want to call that, snap ring. Royal pain in the neck, goes by many names. Reinstall the lever. Got a little powder coat hang point there inside the hole that's in the way a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna have to remove a little bit of powder coat from that hole. Before I do that, why don't we go ahead and put the reservoir on, so that way we don't have a exposed area for that powder coat dust to get in, mess things up. Same thing on this, just a little bit of this grease. There it is. Very nice. So the new reservoir and this chrome cover were separate purchases, so keep that in mind. The reservoir came with a different cap. The chrome cap piece was purchased separately. The lid on the reservoir replacement informs you that you have to reuse this diaphragm backing plate. Got that hole reamed out. Go ahead and reinstall our switch. And there's a small notch on one side of the switch. See if I can show you that up close. That little notch has to line up with that screw hole. As far as the lever goes, I greased up the pivot points as well. There's one rebuilt front brake master. Looking really nice too. There it is. Time for rear brake master. Last one. One thing about the brake crafters kit that I got, I noticed this push rod much shorter. And I don't want to run into getting all this back together to find out that I don't have enough adjustment. So went ahead and sandblasted the old one. I'm going to reuse it because I think that's the right thing to do. The adjustment was out here, and if you'll see this other, it wouldn't even be able to reach that point. So seemed reasonable to me, and I am gonna smear some brake fluid. Inside the start of that bore. To help ease things in. Just like the other kit, this primary cup, or secondary cup, sorry, is not installed on the piston, but this one, I don't have as much to go over this direction, so I think I'm going to try it from this direction. Also lubricating it with a little bit of the red rubber grease that they supply with the kits. Rub some of that on the inside. Try to wipe off some excess here. They cautioned pretty heavily in the packaging about not going overboard with that red grease. And they also mentioned quite a bit how these parts should only be installed by a trained professional. I'm pretty sure that's all there for liability's sake, but I don't know, I think this end might still be larger than the other end. Already committed. There we go. That looks nice. A little bit of brake fluid on this guy. And that's how it all goes in that direction. And I'm expecting this to be quite difficult. And this is all made even more difficult by not having a good set of snap ring pliers. What I've got is these cheap Harbor Freight needle tip pliers that I've bent the tips on. They do okay. I do have some of these snap ring pliers. These are the kind that you can flip around. Problem is, as soon as you start to get that thing compressed a little bit, these just twist and then they're kind of useless. So ain't nothing to it but to do it. That's it. That's in. Sweet. Now all that's left is the boot. I'm gonna go ahead and take this bracket off. Oh, I lied. There's also that piece for the reservoir tube. Here's that piece. And there should be an O-ring for it. Oh, you know what? I did not see that in the kit. That is a bummer. Really surprised that they wouldn't include that O-ring. Well, I have the old one in the garage. Alright, I've got the O-ring. Unfortunately, it is healthy. It was a little dirty, but cleaned up just nicely. And should work just fine. That's why I always keep track of these old parts before, you know, up until the point where the project's completed, because you never know, you know, what's not going to come with the kit, what's not going to fit. If I had thrown away this push rod and that O-ring and just assumed that they would be in the kit correctly, I would not be a happy camper right now. A little bit of grease on this guy too. Just a little bit. So I like to gob it on there, rub it around. wipe the excess off my fingers until you have a nice light smear. It sits right in there. Just like that. There we go. Rear master rebuilt. That boot's actually supposed to sit next groove down. There we go. That feels nice. I'll go ahead and start with the front caliper brackets. There's one. So, easy way to tell which caliper is which. When it's on the bike, the bleeder should be facing up. Beautiful. So I got all new Galfer stainless steel braided brake lines. Be honest with you, I'm not 100% on which way these are all supposed to face. This one's marked master cylinder, so that's pretty obvious, but it's got a bent end and a straight end. I don't know which one's supposed to go where. So right now I'm just kind of guessing. I put the bent end of both of these on the coupler, which has to be reused. You don't get those with the brake lines. And then I've got the straight end going to the calipers. So let's see how this works out. The master cylinder feeds up through the headlight bracket. There's a loop on the back side of that fork gear. And then it goes behind this bracket, which holds the emblem on the front. I wonder how many more times I'm gonna drop that washer. 20 probably. I think that's why they give you extra with the kit, because they know you're going to drop 20 of them. All of this seems right. I can't see anything wrong with it. Just take you off the stand here. It's nice and uniform at least. I think when the cable management is complete, everything's going to look real good. So I'm going to get out the book, find the torque specs for all these bolts that I just put in finger tight, and torque them down. Alright, so I did a few things off camera. Torque down these bolts. I didn't torque down these bolts because I still have to remove the calipers to put the front wheel back on whenever I get the rotors. I did torque down all the pressure fittings, put on the front badge. Even routed through that little clip. I took the rubber, cut the rubber off of the old brake line, tied it here, torqued that down. I put the grips and mirrors on, and that looks just awesome. One thing I didn't have, I swore I had when I got this fender, is the clip for this side. The other side I have. Even had the rubber, but I don't know what happened to this one, so I might have to make another trip back to the junkyard, see if I can scrounge one of those up. Can't imagine it'd be too difficult. So all that's looking just fantastic. So now it's time to move on to the rear. Alright, and I've already torqued the brake line onto the master cylinder because I don't know that I'll be able to get in there with the torque wrench. After I get this in. So hopefully I've got that at the right angle. Although having that brake line on there might be stopping me from getting this thing positioned right. Away for now. go. Now replacing this reservoir hose, I searched for 1/2 inch inner diameter remote brake fluid reservoir hose. This is what I found. It's like less than $1 a foot. It seems to fit on there nicely. Only issue is the hose clamps are quite snug. Let's see if I can get it on there with the hose clamp just barely engaged. I don't think I'll ever be able to pinch it and get it screwing back onto itself while it's in such a tight space. I can probably just take the reservoir off. Didn't realize you couldn't see what I was doing here. Sorry. Well, now that it's done, check it out. Looks nice, doesn't it? Alright, rear master cylinder and reservoir in place. Got the pin for the brake pedal in with a new cotter pin. That all went in very nicely. And then the brake line has been routed through all the clips with the rubbers off the old brake line. So that's ready for the rear wheel. Up front, I went ahead and took off the calipers, wrapped them up and zip tied them to the fork tubes, and that bracket is off so that this is just ready for accepting the new rotor, not new rotors, but freshly resurfaced rotors on the nice cleaned up wheel with the new tire and everything. I did go ahead and skip the boring part of bleeding the front brakes. I used a vacuum pump to pull brake fluid to both calipers from the reservoir and then bled them just with the bottle method, and everything went great. It lever travels about 1 inch and then it gets very firm, and I think it's going to work very nicely, but won't know till we get that on. But that's all ready and set to go. So now I just got to get the rotors back from True Disc and mount them on the wheels and be ready to go. But that's just about it for rebuilding the brakes. We are going to have to cover bleeding the rear ones, but I think the next video we'll be able to put the wheels back on, put the body panels on, and then go for a test ride. After bleeding the brakes, of course. But thanks for joining me. Hopefully somebody finds this helpful. Subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks.